I declare the meeting open and welcome you to this month's meeting of Council. The recording of this Council meeting will be available to the public on Council's website for a minimum period of 6 months. In accordance with Council policy, I will now ask staff to confirm that the recording has commenced.
Yes, it has, Mayor.
We acknowledge the traditional custodians of the South East Nation, the Malakadee people of the Yorn River, and the Lilaquani people of the Far South. We recognise their continuing connection to land, water and culture, and we pay our respects to their elders past, present. Tonight we have in attendance Deputy Mayor Thorpe, Councillor Armstrong, Councillor Jessup, Councillor Burgess, Councillor Gibson, Councillor O'Neill and Councillor Robertson. CEO, can you introduce your staff, please?
I will. Executive staff here tonight. We have Director of Governance, Strategy and, sorry, that's wrong, General Counsel, Matt Grimsey. So I'm just reading straight off the script. Director of People and Corporate Services, Paddy Johnson. Our Director of Community and Place, Lyle Ground, and our Manager of, Director of Infrastructure, Frank Chen, who's here whilst surprising me to be here tonight. And our Manager of Governance and Risk is also here, Sandra Anderson. We've also got support staff, Kelly Davis, our Media and Communications Coordinator, Alan Finch, our Acting Assistant Manager of Innovation and Technology, and Sandy Rustell, our Executive Assistant. For those regulars with Council, you'll notice we're not using microphones tonight. So tonight is the first time that we've got our new audio system, which is far more sensitive. Hopefully, I'm sure there'll be some viewers on YouTube that'll let us know if it's not working, but it has been thoroughly tested. But tonight is the first time we use it. It is very sensitive. It also means that for public question time, there's no need for a microphone. Just come straight up to the dais, introduce yourself and get on with it. From next month, when we've completed that testing, we'll also have a hearing loop available for including for members of the gallery. So thank you. Carry on.
Thank you. Apologies. There's no apologies tonight. Leave of absence. We have Councillor Jenny Cammer-Smith. Absent. There's no absence tonight. Councillors, does anyone wish to declare an interest in any of tonight's agenda items, please?
No, mate.
No. Thank you. 4.008/24. Do I have a councillor to move a motion that the minutes of the ordinary meeting of Council 26th of June 2024 as circulated be confirmed? Wow, that's all hands. Councillor Gibson and Councillor Burgess. Do any councillors wish to report any changes? Okay, well, I'll put that motion. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That's all present and the motion is carried. CEO, are there any legislative items tonight?
No.
Urgent matters?
No.
So we go on to public participation.
Any announcements from you?
Oh, no,
Okay.
not tonight.
Yes. No.
Oh,
Waste.
yes, I wasn't I? I was going to do that when I'd done that. But we just a reminder about the new smaller bins for your, it's the green lid,
Yep.
bin, isn't it? 80 litres,
The
red bid?
The general waste
Okay.
bins.
General waste. So we're going for smaller bins. They are cheaper. So if you want to do that, you make contact with council. I think there might be, it might be September before the bins are here. There's a hold up with getting them here.
The rollout.
Yep, for the rollout. But please, if you don't fill your big bin, please apply for a smaller one.
Just designed to financially reward those who are creating less waste.
Thank you. Okay, public participation. There was one question taken on notice at June's council meeting, and that the answer to that is on our website and included in the minutes. Questions given on notice, there were 3, and they have been also answered, and the responses are on the website and included in the minutes. So now we've got questions without notice There was no questions tonight. Emailed through, no questions. So we're up to public question time. If you have a question, as the chair, I'll ask you to come forward to change that now. Forward you to come forward and identify yourself by name and area where you live. To make things fair and equitable, we have a limit of 2 questions per person and we allocate about that 15 minutes. So would anybody like to ask a question? Yes, come forward.
Good evening all. My name's Sabrina Fraser and I live illegally in a tiny house on wheels somewhere between Cygnet and Craddock. Can I say thank you so much for introducing small bins? That's really, really great initiative.
Thank you.
The reason I'm here tonight is my heart's breaking because other friends of ours are currently in the situation where they live in a tiny house on land, on mobile wheels, so it's a caravan essentially, and it's parked on a friend's property and they're being investigated by compliance for non-compliance for non-planning, but they have no alternative and they will be homeless if they have to move on. I see that the caravan bylaw is up for review next year, your 2015 bylaw, and I've also seen on the mainland that there have been councils, namely Mount Alexander Shire in central Victoria, who've actually changed the bylaw to help people with homelessness, and in this dire housing situation, I think it's really important. If we were to be evicted, my husband and I, despite coming to Tasmania to start a business here, we'd also be homeless. We cannot afford $400 a week whilst renting a shed at $400 a week and trying to start a business. So I'd like to ask, is there any mechanism whereby council, the mayor, the councillors, the CEO could really try to investigate the options for tiny homes on wheels or caravans? I know there's a lot of red tape facing you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for your, pass it through.
So through you, Mayor, yes, it is something that we certainly are investigating. With respect to the caravan bylaw, it's not current or good practice, so certainly identified there needs to be some changes there. The major issue for the bylaw is disposal of waste, on-site wastewater and those sorts of things, so we're looking at alternative measures for that. The main issue is that it's a matter of planning a residential use of a property, so there's likely to be some changes in relation to that coming in the next year. There may be some provisions which relate to occupancy of caravans, but that may not require specific permits. But again, residential use of land requires planning approval.
Okay. If it's not your land as well?
Well, it requires planning approval. So you could come into the issue of arguments about multiple dwellings and those sorts of things. So it's not an easy issue to solve. Certainly we've approached the government previously in relation to dealing with this issue because it's causing problems to councils across Tasmania, and obviously the housing crisis is making this a more common occurrence.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have any other questions? Yes, Paul?
Thank you. Yes, first I'd like to say thank you for your response to my question at the last meeting. I believe that community grants are a very important function of councils in that they enable projects and activities that support local community groups and encourage volunteering. So it's really good to see the allocation of $18,000 to community education and activities and $10,000 for community event support. From the answer, it looks as if this is in addition to the community grants and benefits allocation of $25,000 reported in the budget. Is that correct? I'm not sure.
Can we pass that one? Or do you want to take that?
We'll take that one on notice. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes?
I'm going to ask a second question while I'm here.
Yes.
This is from General Reports, agenda number 11.007/24. And my question is about the Heritage Survey project for Cygnet Township, which aims to identify local places, precincts, landscapes, and areas of archaeological potential for inclusion in the local provisions schedule. It appears that the heritage consultant and the historian have completed the project, and the findings from this study will inform the forthcoming Cygnet Town Plan. So my question is, what consultations were held with residents of Cygnet to inform the findings of the study? And will the study be made available publicly for local input before a draft Cygnet Town Plan is developed?
Through you, Mayor, there was no direct consultation with the community in relation to the work that has been done to date. The study and information will be made available at the early stages of the Cygnet Town Plan for community consultation and feedback, and where there are individual properties that have been identified for potential inclusion on the heritage list, there will be direct contact with the landowners in relation to that.
So it relates only to individual properties. It doesn't relate to the broader history and the potential archaeology of the
So
of
there
the
are
township.
two components. The first component is individual properties, so that would be included on the heritage list, and the second one really, and it's probably a bit too broadly described there, is that it's looking at particular areas of Cygnet which have heritage significance as an area. So in similar manner that Franklin has a provision over most of the area of Franklin, there will be locations in Cygnet which have such heritage value that there will be provisions relating to those areas.
Okay. And do you have a time frame for when this report will be released and the beginning of the town plan will be started?
So our project plan is in the next 2 months to start the town plan work. That is, and we're looking to complete that this financial year.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Do I have any other questions from the gallery? All right. Okay, I'll find my spot. Okay, CEO, are there any deputations tonight?
No.
Petitions?
No.
So I will now advise that we are acting as a planning authority. 10.1, visitor accommodation, change of use, 56 Meadow Road, Jugbury, VA 9/2024. I refer the councillors to the recommendation of this report. Do I have a councillor to move the motion, please? Councillor Gibson and a seconder. Councillor Robertson. Councillor Gibson, do you wish to speak to this?
Yes, and I have a few questions. I guess my concerns, and these were expressed in some of the representations, were around the fact that when visitors are in an area, they don't, and when there's a constant turnover, they don't have local area knowledge. So I was wondering whether it was possible to have, and this is outside the planning scheme, but it's some sort of advisory request that people visiting are made aware about safety around the bushfires, safety for animals and generally. So that's, as I said, that's outside the planning scheme. The question I had within the planning scheme was E1.2. Does this proposal involve a vulnerable use on land that is located within or partially within a bushfire zone? I thought that would be a yes, but we have it as a no.
I'll pass that one through to you.
The planning officer has assessed it and has deemed it that it is a no, and that's the recommendation that's been put forward.
Can you explain that a bit more? Because I would have thought that this is...
I don't have the planning the nuanced, the planning provisions right in front of me at the moment. I have the application as it stands in terms of the information that the planning officer has given forward. So I can only go on with the suitably qualified planning officers put forward, and that is that it's a no, and I clarified that earlier today, and it was definitely a no, they checked it again.
Do you have any others? Or
No, that's all. Thank you.
do I have any other councillor that would like to ask a question on this? No? Do you want to have a closing?
No, I think that's all.
Okay.
I guess the question about that advisory note, as outside the planning scheme, can we mention to the proponent, the owner, that might be a good idea to inform visitors to the area about such things, or is that not possible?
It has no standing in planning, but
We have done it
we
before,
can,
though.
We can provide advice,
Yeah.
and the owner can choose
I'm sure that
to adopt that or not.
It's in their interest as
Sure.
well, so
Yeah,
if you could do that, that'd be great.
Advice to that effect.
There's no harm in putting that advice.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, there's no other questions, or I'll put the motion then. Please, all those in favour, please raise your hand. Motion carried. We're up to 10.003/24, retrospective application for native vegetation clearing at Snowy View Heights, DA 15/2024, and I'll pass that through to the Director.
Thank you, Mayor. Apologies for the late change, but in answering a few questions from councillors, it became clear to me that condition 6 in the original recommendation in the minutes, in the agenda, needed to be amended to make it implementable. So I've put forward a submission that amends that condition, and that's before the councillors at the moment for them to consider.
That's highlight.
That's correct, highlighted in green. And just to go into details, just to remove the 1 month time condition on that particular condition, and the reason is because from a practical level, and one doesn't want to do works outside of the growing season or the rainy season. So we just want to be mindful that potentially that approval could happen outside of that season, and then it would make the applicant have to then do that works within that month, which wouldn't be ideal.
Okay, so do I have someone to move with the change to 6? Yes, Councillor Jessup, and seconder Councillor Gibson. Do you wish to speak to this, Councillor Jessup?
Thank you. Now I'm looking to turn on the microphone. Look, as a principle, I think it's very dangerous to do retrospective approvals of any sort of development. But I note with this that it is quite an old approval, and really what we're approving is a change to something after something's been done. I note that the landholder was penalised for not seeking approval first. There's been a fine put in place, and I note that where the vegetation clearing has exceeded the original approvals, my understanding is that's been required to be remediated. So in that sense, we're going back to approving what was approved in 2007 or 9 or whatever, or 10 or whatever it was. So while I think it's not a good practice, I don't think it's a radical change to what was approved and what all of the people who bought on that space knew about at the time. But obviously somebody's gone beyond what they should have done. They now will need to fix it.
Thank you. Do I have any other? Yes, councillor?
Well, I'm pretty disappointed in the attitude of the developer around this. It was very clear in the original documentation from 2007 and 2012 about protection of this landscape, but it's been done, and I guess I've got a number of minor issues I wouldn't mind putting in to tighten up on some of the wording. In B.3, I was wondering if we could make it more prescriptive. There's an expression, located to provide for as much vegetation and rehabilitation of cleared and disturbed areas as possible. And I don't know, it's a tricky one to know what is. So I guess that's a question there. In B.7, the use of machinery and waterways that cross the northern part of the land should be avoided. I think that probably is prohibited. Just again to strengthen that. And I did have a question. Around this, I just thought about this as I was driving down. The visibility from the road has been assessed with no buildings on the site, but obviously they're going to be building envelopes on that ridge line, and the actual visibility will be of a building that's at minimum 3 metres higher than that. And I wondered whether that was something that was going to then get picked up when the owners who buy and want to build in these lots, whether that's going to become a problem, but or whether that should be being addressed at this point, I'm not sure.
Would you like to go through the changes that we've already spoken about? What ramifications does it have for 7 to go from avoided to prohibited?
I don't foresee any major issue with that. It's the first point that Councillor Gibson raised, which is around that. I'm not sure what the alternative that is being proposed there, but one has to be considered that there still needs to be assessment of what the spatial extent of that hazard management area would be, and there's a few other nuances that need to be assessed still in determining what that extent would be, and then that would then determine what the as much as possible can be. At this stage, there's not enough information, and nor would there be. Should we expect there to be, for that to be determined, it has to be determined outside of this process. Hence why the condition is worded in the way that it talks to the discretion sitting with the director. So it allows us to have that discussion outside of the DO.
So just to clarify, the director then would be able to say that's as much as possible.
Correct. Yeah. It gives an indication of what that would look like, and in that it talks to Bell 19.
Yes.
But yes, the finality of that would sit with the director.
And sorry, just back to 7. That waterway is in the extreme northern tip of the property, right?
Correct.
So hence, if it went to prohibited, it's
The likelihood of it being impacted or having machinery in it is very low given its locality.
Yeah.
Correct.
As a mover of the motion, could I suggest that rather than prohibited, that something that we give discretion to the director to approve it? Maybe that's the way to do it, rather than making it blanket, to say if machinery is to be used in this area, prior approval, like the discretion of the director, or prior approval needs to be sought from the director. Yeah, just to give you the flexibility of managing it. And on the other one about the housing, I suppose my concern is that it is a DA that's been approved for housing in the past. It was always, if you look at the original DA, it was always going to have houses roughly in that area. But what they've tried to do, I think in this, as they've said, let's try to minimise the visual impact by making it as close to the road as possible. So you're not putting a house up the back of the block sort of thing, which,
I guess my point is that the clearing has made a lot of it more visible than it was going to be, and so now we've got areas of land on a ridgeline that people are going to be wanting to build houses on, and
that will be revegetated, I think, from what.
yes,
Well, and that's up to obviously the director and compliance staff to pursue it.
I just have one other thing, which was around the landslip area where we didn't have any. We can't obtain retrospective landslip risk information. Should we be then saying that again, rather than as much land as possible be rehabilitated, that all the land that's in that landslip risk area should be rehabilitated?
Through to you.
Through you, Mayor. Yep. Certainly the planning officer's assessment around looking at that risk, it is low. The vast majority is low risk. We also have an understanding of the site itself, and the officers assessed that that's not necessary. What will address it is the condition that is there, which will allow that risk to be assessed outside of the assessment process. And if it's found that it is, then mitigation measures can be put forward.
And any housing would need landslip assessments anyway. So the individual structures will be built safely, hopefully.
Those are all the points that I had.
Okay, so
I'm happy to accept them if he tells me what names. Do you want to word them?
Your wording, the only one that still stands is B7 to the discretion of the director.
Yeah, cool. I'm happy with that amendment, Mayor.
happy with,
Through you, Mayor, I just noticed subject to prior approval from the director community in place.
Yeah. Prior approvals preferably.
Yeah.
okay. Yes, we'll go Toby, Amy and Dave.
I just have a general question for the record because I know I've asked before. This is the first retrospective DA that I've sat in on. I just want to confirm that a retrospective DA is still considered and assessed in a prior to the fact assessment to as much as possible rather than after the fact.
Yes, that is through you, Mayor. That is correct. So we assess it as we would any other application, and it is assessed prior to the fact, given that any sort of unpermitted works was just that it was unpermitted.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor Robertson.
First, a comment on. First, an overall comment that the complexity of multiple stages and evolution of this development is difficult to get your head around, and I can see that we are dealing with legacy issues from standards and schemes that are not contemporary. And I appreciate the work that's gone in to try to find solutions here. If I go into some details on Councillor Gibson's comment on clause 7, I think is to be avoided. The existing wording is probably stronger than subject to permission of an officer. And I note that corner. I think the vegetation is still standing, is likely, it's not targeted through any of the proposed development, and there are other things such as the Boundary Fences Act that might potentially enable entry of a machine into the waterway area. So I think is to be avoided is sufficiently strong language. But anyway, just a comment on the visibility of houses on a ridgeline. It's ironic that had they retained that vegetation around there, then the assessment of those residential developments would have been likely to benefit from that screening effect. But that's something to be assessed at the time in future. On the landslip or landslide hazards, and I note that the report and recommendations terminology of a landslide risk assessment and report don't entirely align with our planning scheme wording of a landslide risk management report, which then leans on some of the definitions and so forth from the planning scheme. But it's actually, and that's what the officers recommended. I'm a little surprised that it wasn't requested during the assessment process as an RFI, or request for further information that could have been made. And so curiosity got me to look at that. Now, we're essentially assessing the proposed clearing of vegetation from that potential low landslide risk area. So it's clearing of vegetation from a landslide risk area is not in itself a terribly risky activity. Activities such as roading or building a structure, and in particular the concentration of water runoff that happens through those activities, are the really big risks that could cause landslide risk. So we're rated low. The roading's done. The roading has presumably been through that landslide assessment process, I hope. And if not, then it's still outside the scope of this council's decision. So looking at considering the risk of vegetation in light of roading having already occurred and potentially, hopefully, being assessed, and looking at the future stage of any residential development on these sites as a more significant risk than vegetation removal in itself, I'm actually not that troubled by the landslide risk. And that's based on, I've got some land management background. I do landslide risk assessment in my work around vegetation removal through the forest practices system.
So are you saying that there's nothing wrong with what's worded?
I'm saying it's not necessary. I am leaning towards proposing that clause 5 and the sentence referencing clause 5 under clause 4 be removed. I love a good bit of bureaucracy, but I hate a bit of unnecessary bureaucracy. And the standard, so we do this stuff under the advice of suitably qualified officers. Certainly in the forest practices system, I'm suitably qualified to assess landslide risk up to 19 degrees in Permian mudstone as per this site, which covers the land description. The other thing to be aware of is that the standard that the planning scheme puts in place for this is, just got to find the wording from the email, if you'll just give me a second. Sorry, I've got Paul's email around. So the report can be required pending on the judgment of acceptable risk. There's an acceptable risk standard that's actually referenced by the planning scheme, and that's not actually defined in the planning scheme. So looking at the area around this subdivision, as a land manager, I'd be looking for any evidence of past or historical landslide, or any evidence of landslide or pre-landslide activity on cleared areas on the same soil and rock type around it. And I don't see that. So This low landslide risk exists to allow council to impose conditions when there are signs of a potential problem.
So
I don't think there
for
are.
the move of the motion, could I suggest an option, which might be at the discretion of the director, blah, 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 a landslip risk assessment report? Because I don't feel that, while I acknowledge your professional expertise is more than most of us in the room, I suspect, I just would rather the director go back and talk to his planning staff to say, do we really need that? Rather than us making a decision not to do it.
Correct. I mean, we need to meet the provisions of the scheme. And that's either council's accepting around the table based on the discussion we've just heard that we're willing to accept that risk and do no further work, or we get a suitably qualified advice on it, which is the recommendation of the officer as put before you.
But given the erstwhile discussion that we've had,
Yep.
I'm happy if we gave the director discretion to require that, to go back and talk to his staff and say, well, is it something that we really need? And if they insist it is something we really need, we go ahead. But if they go, oh, in retrospect, maybe not.
So
I
there
can make
needs
the
to,
CEO if we want to save his goose. We can.
so we'll need, if that's the case, we need someone to move an amendment.
I'm happy as a mover. I'd be happy to accept that if Paul, that seconder. I don't think it's.
I'm a little hesitant to accept that because I think we need a bit of paper from somebody else assessing it. I don't really think we want us to do it in-house, even though, as you have said, Amy, Councillor has skills in this area. I think we want.
And I guess just one other point, that the way all these inputs are structured would require that landslide risk report. So you need to get a geo person on site and written up the report before, because that needs to be incorporated into the re-veg plan. So if we're wanting re-veg to happen promptly on site, by requiring a landslide report for an evidently low hazard site, we're actually deferring the re-veg.
Okay. So all we can say is then, if you want to move and you accept, but Paul doesn't accept, so we'll have to go
So
with
can I move?
Yes,
If I can get a seconder?
yes, that's correct. You can. Is there a seconder for Amy's amendment to the motion?
So sorry, what's Amy's amendment though? To remove it or to put it to the director's
I'm
discretion?
gonna move, delete 5 and the sentence referencing it from 4.
Mhm.
So I'm gonna,
Yep. Sure.
Okay. Do I have a seconder?
Can I just ask a quick question?
You may.
So, I mean, the point of 5, as I understand it, is for the council to get professional, external assessment of the situation, of the risk. I guess the question is, what's
council doesn't have,
are we taking a lot of responsibility if we just remove this and accept that we know about that the risk is not
Okay, that's,
much?
thank you.
That's the question.
Yes, Amy?
the planning scheme doesn't say that we have to get a report.
No.
The planning scheme says we can get a report, but it also says that we can also judge it as, what did I say it was? Acceptable risk.
Okay.
Which is correct. Yep.
So,
So
Yeah.
the,
Oh,
I
so
don't have the
So
expertise.
the guidance of the officers who look at this all the time are saying, which is in keeping with what we've been doing for years, is that we would seek suitably qualified expertise, because the risk we can't manage what we don't know, hence why. Or as Amy's Councillor Robinson's providing, is that we can accept that risk and go down an alternative pathway.
In the context of already having done significant risky roadworks and being able to assess risk for the residential developments in future.
Yes, councillor Burgess.
Yeah, through you, Mayor. I noticed Councillor Robertson hasn't got a second of her motion yet. And I feel that we'll be taking quite a big risk if we made that decision. It's in the recommendation that they do a landslide risk assessment, and I think just leave 5 in. It's my opinion.
Thank you. All right, so we need a set. Has councillor Robertson got a seconder for her amendment to the motion?
Which is to remove that whole thing. I'm not really comfortable removing that whole thing, to be honest.
Okay, so no, wait, sorry.
I'd be happy
Sorry,
to
maybe?
flick it back to the director, but I won't
And
remove it.
well, just to expand on that, if you did want to move that, which is to revert it back to the director's discretion, the direction would be that we would go get you some further detail on why that's necessary or otherwise, knowing that there is an appetite to potentially not explore this. So give councillors an idea of what we're going to do before we did it. We wouldn't just go away and do it.
It would have been a good question to ask before had we all thought about it.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
I would still be interested in that advice because certainly the view I've formed talking to a lot of ratepayers that local government around Australia errs on the side of seeking more reports and more reports. So us understanding how that works, and I could even pose that as a question which we can get a written response to later. I'm not criticising the planners by any means, but I think it's good transparency for them to say, here's why.
Sure.
I sort of see it's grey, but the only amendment I'd accept as a mover would be to kick it back to the director's discretion. But, unless other people are happy to do that, and Paul's not happy to do that.
Well, I'm happy to put it in as at the very end, this holds, but at the directors can have discretion on it, and if the developer comes up and says, look, it really is quite safe, and I don't know, convinces the director that it is. But I'm not going to sit here and make that decision.
But would you be happy to add 16, which says, and any of this can be changed at the director's discretion? I don't think I'd be happy to add that either.
Which is already the way it is. I mean, this is the director's discretion.
Yes, councillor O'Neill.
Yeah, but I definitely agree that we should be trying to simplify and not put additional costs onto developers, but I'm not happy to take 5 out. But I think it would be good to put a spotlight and ask the planners to reassess, and that might give us give them more direction for the future. We might be able to sort of keep things simpler.
I'll ask that question later when we come to the councillor question too.
And look, generally, we're asking for things that we either must have or that add value. We don't want to be just adding additional burden, and it's always good to be challenging that. We've got, we've just restructured council. We are trying to add value, and this is a case in point where it's just a perfect example to challenge these kind of ideas and look at what appetite we've got to manage risk, insofar as we also need to meet the planning scheme.
Yes, yeah.
Sorry. Through you, Mayor, I'm really uncomfortable with this whole planning thing, because it was clear from the beginning what was required and what wasn't done. It really doesn't matter whether it's, been purchased by somebody else and moved along. It was clearly stated that there shouldn't have been this degree of clearing, and things have been done that should not have been done. My concern is when we start to retrospectively approve these sorts of things with a fine and revegetation, which is going to take quite a long time to regrow to the extreme that it was removed before. Is this a precedent that we set for anybody that decides that they're going to do a subdivision and they're just going to illegally strip things down, whack the fine, get a retrospective approval with the DA? There was no doubt from the beginning with this development application that there was a certain criteria and it was breached.
And compliance action has been taken.
Yes.
So we've taken enforcement action, and I completely agree with the sentiment. But that's not to say that we want to then just lock that land up and prevent, development occurring in an area which is, zoned for housing, and that's what's occurring. So
And how long have they had to wait? How long has this been going on for?
The application only.
No, it's just
Yeah, okay.
My other concern is reading, and I've been there, I work up that way, and I've also worked on the other side of the hill where you can see Clearage as well, and these people paid good money for those blocks so they could admire the view, which now is not there. So I totally understand their frustration. And it took 9 months to get to that point, and council didn't step in, did we, in that 9 months when people were sort of unhappy with noise and...
enforcement action is a process. So we were working through that for the majority of that time, if not the entire time.
that is true.
There's an evidentiary process that you work through and try to get an accord with the developer to change ways. So we were definitely doing stuff the whole time.
I'm just...
Sorry, through you, Mayor. Can I just a point on the view? That property itself is zoned rural living, and because of the size, it's clear in terms of the zone that it has development potential, both subdivision and the development itself. So I sympathise with the view issue, but one needs to, when looking at these things, look at the zone of the property, because that gives an indication of what is potentially developable on that particular property.
I understand that, but the clearing was extreme
Don't disagree.
and was not part of the original plan, and people that built that knew that was not part of the original plan. And I think it was not appropriate for a developer to do that, is all I'm sort of saying. And I understand that there's now a cause and effect situation with this, but it's not ideal because it's going to take years to re-establish what has now been removed. And basically it's a slap on the wrist. Here's some new things that you have to apply yourself to, and off you go. If we approve this, that's pretty much what it is at the end of the day. But on the same token, we are also over a barrel because we need housing and we need blocks. So it's a bit of a catch-22, like it's a difficult thing because they should have followed. Everybody else has to follow the permit. So I'm sorry to sound brutal and harsh, but I do always come across brutal and harsh. That's just how I see things. So that's my 5 cents worth of the conversation. Thank you.
So, Councillor Jessup, we're back to your moving to alter number.
I think the only thing that I accepted was the change to clause 7, which was to add a discretion. We're not willing to accept the change to clause 5, and I don't think any of Paul's other comments were specific. So I'm happy with that. If Paul's happy with that bit of motion.
So, is that an amendment to the amendment? No, it's just
an accepted with the mover seconder
and you're happy with that?
Consented by the meeting.
Okay. All right. Is there any further? No? You want to close?
Mayor, I am absolutely sympathetic with Councillor Armstrong's and others' concern about retrospective clearing, and I think had this not been a pre-existing DA that had been approved, and like one of the many hundreds of zombie DAs or legacy DAs, it has always, though, been fairly clear from my understanding that since 2007 that space was going to be subdivided. I note that the developer has got a fine, but I think somebody did raise that the firewood they sold off the property probably sufficiently paid for the fine. So, but look, I think it is what it is, and as long as council council officers enforce the revegetation, and I'm sure Lyle's team will do that. So I'm happy to accept the motion, noting that there'll be 6 or 7 new lots for people to build houses on, and that's a good thing.
All right, thank you. Well, if that's the case, then I'll put that forward. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That's all councillors present, and the motion is carried. Thank you. So we're now up to 10.004/24, multiple dwellings times 4 at 11 Crofton Court, DA 187/2023. Do I have a councillor to move the motion? Councillor Gibson, a seconder. Councillor O'Neill. You wish to speak, Councillor Gibson?
Yes. I note that the area is zoned low density residential, mostly due to the historical flooding of the creek, which has been rectified by council's great work. With the main drain, I think we need to support densification of towns, Huonville, and not be sprawling out into the hills. Although I understand that for the neighbours there will be quite a big change. I accept the planner's ruling that it will be it's not an unreasonable impact on their amenity. And in planning terms, the development is within the envelopes, which is great, except for the decks. And I think the decks, as an encroachment, could easily be a terrace, but in this case they're a deck. I don't think that makes a lot of difference to the impact of the local amenity. I was pleased to see the overshadowing was minimal, and it's always, I know as an architect, it's always very difficult to not have a bit of overshadowing in the early morning when the sun's very low. It's sort of the nature of density, I guess. So overall, I support the planner's assessment of the planning scheme.
Thank you. Anybody else like to have a question or comment on this one? Yes, Councillor Armstrong.
Just a quick question, and probably directed at Councillor Gibson, because I'm not really knowing very much about building. 7.4 metres is quite high, isn't it? Like, that's higher than your average, 2-storey. Would that be something that would be normally put in a single-storey subdivision? Like, is there a requirement to keep things at...
2 stories is allowable in the scheme, as
Yes,
long as it's
so
within
you
the
still
envelope.
could do that.
Up to 8.5 metres is allowable.
Yeah, okay. It's just a bit unusual, probably.
It's a different format than what we're used to in
Yes.
Huonville. Yep,
Yeah.
but it's allowable.
Because I can understand the neighbours' concern because of where they are, and it is tricky getting in and out of driveways, and it will increase traffic flow and all this sort of stuff. But it was just and that they're a little bit of an unusual look for that area as well, which I can also understand their concern about.
More sheddy sort of.
More sheddy, yeah, a little bit more, I don't know, you call it contemporary. It doesn't really, they don't really fit with the aesthetic of the neighbourhood. They do sort of stand out a little bit more than...
I think you're going to probably see more of this. Yeah.
Cost-effective building.
I mean, none of that is anything that we can control either, but it's not sort of in keeping with the rest of the neighbourhood, when I guess the same thing as people bought homes thinking that they would just be homes, not expecting subdivisions or little, blocks of units that look like sheds behind their houses. No offence to the developer, or the architect.
Well, it's change too.
I think, as the director said about the previous one, the planning scheme, it paints a picture. So every zone has its look, and the second story, as long as it fits within that envelope, it drives a certain shape and certain appearance. So probably up until now in Huonville, things haven't been pushed to that extent. But as more people want to move in and land prices are higher, and
I think you could still build a second story thing. Perhaps it didn't look like a shed. as well, maybe, you
I
know.
suppose that's, everyone's view is
That's
different.
right.
on-
That's right. You know, it's just I think because they're very modern, aren't they, in their design, and the rest of the cul-de-sac isn't modern in its design, and I can understand that it's a dark material, and they're probably going to think they're going to get lots of shading and lots of blockage and everything else, but. I also can understand people's frustration when they buy houses next to people, not expecting in a million years that people are going to whack 3 units up. You know, it does seem unfair to a certain extent. It is a planning scheme, and there's nothing that regulates it, really, is
Well,
it?
the
So,
whole point is it's their land, and as long as it's allowable.
Yeah, well, I mean, we regulate it
Yeah.
and it's allowable.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and if we're going to house the amount of people that we,
and this just comes back to this forward planning thing where it would be nice to have lots of diverse homes in certain areas, because then it wouldn't be such a standout when you get 3 that are this design in a, I'd like to say maybe a 1980s cul-de-sac, 80s, 90s cul-de-sac.
yes,
There certainly are more, but I suppose this reinforces the need for us to go on with some of our special area plans for places like Cygnet and Franklin to really, because that's the only tool that we have that can shape building materials and sizes and density and stuff like that. But look, as Paul, Councillor Gibson was saying, I hope that there's some areas of new development around Huonville where we actually specify higher density living and more of this, but I think time will get people more used to it. But yes, I do understand what you're saying, that it's a concern in your backyard, so to speak. But I think it's, these are cheaper, thermally more efficient often to build and stuff. So
Not my
that's
backyard.
what everybody's pushing.
Not
Yeah.
my backyard.
Your
Oh, yes.
little backyard, yes.
councillor, Robertson?
I think there is a really interesting contrast between this proposal and the previous one. And I am actually, I can see the challenge and the change of this proposal, but I can actually see some really good elements of it. So rather than these structures, each individual residence sprawling, they are compacted. They sit lower on the slope than the neighbourhood and the street approach, so that minimises the disturbance of a taller but more compact structure. And I can actually see that there's enough space between these units that we see, we often see unit developments of single-storey villas that don't have a lot of green between them. You're going to be able to actually fit a tree between these. So in that sense, the feeling of standalone residences is maintained. So there is some, so that I like the siting and the position on the slope. I appreciate the feedback from the report about overshadowing. I appreciate the concerns of neighbours and people who put a representation in. I think there's this massive challenge of how do we deal with change, and there's only going to be more of this, which doesn't mean that we just cop it on the chin. It means we proactively figure out how to do it well. But my sense is that this will deliver well, and it ticks the regulatory boxes.
Thank you. Any other comments on this one? Well, then we've got to remember that on that block, we now have 3 instead of probably 1, or whatever we might have had before. Okay, Councillor Gibson, do you like to close on this one?
I don't think I've got anything further to say. Thanks.
All right, well, I'll put that motion. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That's all, councillors, and the motion is carried. I advise that the council is no longer acting as a planning authority. I'll go into general reports. Are there any councillors tabling their activities tonight?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you. Would anyone like to speak to them? It's a number. Yes, councillor.
Oh, sorry. No,
Yeah.
to the general reports, or is this to?
Just to your report. No, thank you.
Oh, well, except to say that the conference was excellent,
That's July.
and the
Yeah,
I
that's
thought it was
okay.
very constructive, and I learned a lot. And the mayor's asked me to. I took a lot of notes. I'll give a brief sort of summary of those at the next meeting.
Thank you very much for that. Thank you. All right. So, no others? Okay, we'll move on. 11.007/24. Do I have a councillor to move a motion that the general reports and minutes for the period of 1 to 30th of June 2024 be received and noted? Councillor Armstrong and Councillor O'Neill. Councillor Armstrong, do you wish to speak to that?
No, not at the minute, thank you, Mayor.
Okay, do you have any other? Yes, Councillor Gibson?
A few little questions.
Yeah.
In the emergency management section, I was just a comment. I was very pleased to hear that Huron Valley SES has had some success with their volunteer recruitment drive. I think that's excellent. I had a question around the Be Ready for Storms and Floods promotion that's been started.
Yeah.
And I wondered if that would include the risk of the failure of the Edgar and Scotts Peak Dam, which has been sort of in the news. Whether that's something that's going to be included.
The readiness campaign is just being ready for floods in a general sense. It's not prepare yourself for an event of that magnitude, no.
In community development, I wondered if we had a workshop planned to discuss the halls review. I'd like to be on top of that, and sort of been trucking along for a while.
We don't have one scheduled at the moment, I don't think, but we will be scheduling it soon because we've now completed all the participatory sessions with halls, and we'll be bringing that back together, talking to councillors about it before we have a final town hall type session to present the outcomes and a final conversation with the community.
Great. On that note, also I noticed that the survey didn't include the various options, the online survey, and I just wondered why that was the case.
We didn't want to, so it's always a balance between giving too much direction and taking the suggestions down a particular pathway, or keeping it nice and open so that people have that space to think about those. So in the workshops themselves that we held, the face-to-face, we did have them there just to try and trigger some thinking, but in the survey we left it open to allow people to have that space to think of innovative and out-the-box ideas.
Right. Are those options up on the website?
I will double check that, yeah, I'll take that on notice.
Because probably some people might want to have a look at those. Under climate change, I just wanted to say how impressed I am with the approach that council is taking. I think it's fantastic. I think the work around anxiety is critical. Working towards win-win situations where we all benefit and climate does as well. I think that's laudable. With regard to the roads, I had heard about that too. Oh, I wondered if we could whether there was any information on how residents are responding now that we've been running this new system with the various regions and changed changed gravel roads method of management, whether there's been much sort of change in the response from residents.
I don't have current statistics in front of me. You might, but I know that in the 12 months to the end of after the first 12 months of the new approach, the stats at the time were that we'd reduced complaints and requests on roads by 32%.
Right.
So that's from running that program maintenance and getting around the network. So we'll get you some updated statistics and share that.
Good to assess.
Without it, I mean, our system for being able to compile, it's a difficult process, as you guys know, with the systems that we've got to get ready access to data to show what our customers are telling us, and that's part of our IT kind of forward work plan to improve that, so that we can have that snappy information to you.
Thank you.
Or more importantly, to you.
That's right.
Well,
Yeah.
it would then relay through you, but yes, we need it as a management tool is the critical piece.
Okay, any other? Yes, Councillor Robertson.
I might ask a question. The LPS is dealt within these reports. A summary on how that very long and for some painful process has landed us, and maybe what continues from here.
Okay, I will pass that through to the Director.
Yeah, so thanks for the question. I think many will know that the draft local provision schedule were exhibited and went through a robust hearing process. The Commission have obviously now considered all the submissions and the evidence provided to them and have issued their decision notice in July. And we've been operating under the Tasmanian planning scheme since the 20th of July. So that decision notice effectively, and it's very long, but it details the Commission's decision on those specific submissions that were made by representatives. And it directs the Planning Authority to make minor or substantive amendments to the local provision schedule. And what's probably important to identify is that there were 4 substantive amendments. So those are amendments that can't just be made immediately. They have to go through a process which includes public consultation. And those 4 amendments, if I quickly summarise, are the Black Swan Lagoon Scenic Protection Areas. That's looking at the scenic protection area of that particular area, which is way down far south, near Cockle Creek. We've got the Priority Vegetation Area Overlay amendments to Port Huon. That's looking to apply it on specific properties. And then the last 2 are applying specific area plans that would allow the Planning Authority to continue to assess acid sulfate soils risk and dispersive soils risk. So those are currently codes within the current in the previous interim planning scheme, but that these specific area plans will allow us to continue assessing those and mitigate and putting in provisions to mitigate that risk. Going forward, so we obviously now have an operational local provision schedule. Our strategic planning team have a long schedule of work in that we want to make sure that LPS stays contemporary and that it's responsive to planning matters, contemporary planning matters. I think some of the discussion we had on those planning reports is pretty relevant. Things like acceptable risk, things like design, and the aesthetics of a town or the heritage of a town. Those are all things that we are looking to address in the next 12 to 24 months through local planning tools. And Councillor Jessup mentioned one, which is specific area plans. That's principally which are then underpinned by structure plans. So certainly a lot of work happening in that space, and we'll be obviously engaging closely with the community and stakeholders on those projects as we progress them.
Thank you. Yes.
Just going through the reports, I note with the heritage survey, I'm confused if is that to do with all heritage sites across the Huon Valley for the LPS or just Cygnet? Because we've talked about the Cygnet one, but in the report it talks about a heritage study that seems to be more general.
Okay, I'll pass that through.
Through you, Mayor, just this is a transition matter between directors. The focus has been on Cygnet. It's quite a significant project to go the entire municipal area. So the focus was identified early on in Cygnet, and certainly as the question was asked earlier, there's opportunities with Cygnet, particularly with the potential for heritage areas within Cygnet. So will be at some point in time when council funds at a broader heritage
That
study.
would be a separate study.
Just because we're more important. That's it. I'm glad you said that.
Thank you, Councillor Armstrong. I'm now aware that Signet is special. For the FOGO, I note that there's some further work done on that, and I'll just get on my hobby horse that I'd still love us to trial a composting plant down in the Huon Valley before the end of this term of these councillors, so even one plant. But it's good to see that there's other work. FOGO's mentioned a bit here, but there's no. I think we decided not to fund that in this budget, but maybe next year
We're not ready to yet, so the work will continue in planning for it.
Do you think we'll be ready by next budget?
I hope so.
Okay.
We've got a lot on though. But it's also an incredibly important one. And when you look at the ever escalating costs of waste disposal that we ultimately have to pass on through to the community, it's in everyone's interest to minimise the cost of waste. And that's our primary aim is what's the cost reduction that comes out of it.
Absolutely. Oh, but also the environmental benefits of local composting and all that stuff for people. The climate, again, in the climate report on page 248, some good stuff there. Echoing what Councillor Gibson was talking about, the Local Government Association meeting that we went to in Canberra, it was just amazing how many municipalities are just banging on about the adaptation issues. One council in the Queensland was talking about replacing their one bridge 3 times in the year because it kept washing away, and how important that is. We did talk about maybe a name change for that position to take some of the edge off that. So I'm just going to remind us that we're talking about that, and also remind that we're probably looking towards some sort of overarching structure that I think you owe me next meeting, I think maybe. We'll work on that or workshop that. And the Huon Link Road Master Plan, which gets back to that SAP word. There was a recommendation that we start working on that. Is that the plan, to look at all that potential residential land that frees up? Is that what we're talking about there when there was a mention of a potential SAP?
That's the correct area, yeah. So that's because obviously that's where the most immediate significant development is going to occur. So that's why we're focusing on that. And we are also in contact and want to be working collaboratively with the developer.
Yeah.
It's the ideal scenario to get it right and make sure the developer's on board from the start. That's what proactive planning looks like, and that's what we're trying to model henceforth.
That will stop all those dead-end cul-de-sacs that isolate communities and all that sort of stuff. Do we have a timeline on when we're going to start that, Sam?
I can say that the work has started already.
Good answer.
So the work has started already. We have a clear idea of the direction we're heading. We are engaging with the developer. We seek to deliver that as it states in the annual plan this financial year.
So it's not just one, is it going to look at that whole chunk of land, not just one? Because there's quite a number of owners of land.
There's a number of projects within that we would be looking at.
Right.
Yeah, but obviously we're going to deal with the one that's the most immediate in terms of the horizon for development. So we're going to deal with that one first. And notwithstanding, we also have that grant in for the better, the precincts and partnerships. But that will encompass quite a significant area too. So hopefully, if that comes forward, that will then fast track some of that phasing of those different components.
Is there a timeline on that grant? Do we know when that?
We wait for the decision. We haven't heard anything. There have been some others that have been announced, none in Tasmania, if I stand to correction, but I think none in Tasmania have been announced, but they're starting to assess and award. So it's a rolling assessed as and when, yeah.
Thank you. That's all my questions, man. So one answer.
Continue crossing your fingers on that one.
And that would be a game changer for us if we got it. And let's hope that there's a November election.
Thank you for that. I have a couple. I was wondering if we could have an update on when we think the weighbridge might be up and running at the Waste Transfer Station.
Is September, I believe. Yep.
That's great. I think that's a game changer for down there. So
Oh, it will be. I mean, it's just necessary modernisation. It takes away any sense that we were arbitrary in our costings down there.
Yeah.
And the contractors have done a fantastic job. Can't wait for it to open.
yeah, it's good to see that we had a couple of large cases of illegal dumping of waste. Yeah, that's good to see.
So that we caught them.
Yes.
Catching them.
Yes, no, definitely. No, not that it's happening, but good to see that that we are doing that. That's because it is a statewide problem. And I had one. What's my other one? No, Shipwright's Point jetty replacement. Yeah, I was wondering if I could have an update on that.
We are close. I think we're receiving the engineering design in the next fortnight is due, and that's obviously been informed by the test holes that we did into the substrate there to make sure that it's designed for those actual seabed conditions and won't have the same problems as the last one.
Yeah, that's good because I get a lot of people that fished there. Off the end of that one, off that jetty there, and the Franklin Oval Club rooms.
That one's progressing well. It's currently at fit-out stage and I think that's due in October to reopen. We're at fit-out. It's got to have concrete cure and then get carpet and epoxy laid.
Yeah, okay.
So it's looking really good.
Yep, that's great. That's all I had. No others from anyone? Yes. Well, you moved it, so
That's right, I can finish that. if everybody else is finished. Yep. So I'm almost too scared to bring up the issue of the pool.
What would you like to know about?
Well, I think we probably should tell people where we are with that and how we're going. And, I've had lots of conflicting advice about we won't be open until next year. I think we're pretty well on track, but people might like to know how on track is, maybe. Please.
I'll pass that
We'll
through.
be
Yeah.
providing a media release this week. I intend. So it will not be opening in August as was originally advised. There's been some project changes to that. We are expecting that it will be advising that it'll be opening in the first quarter of next year, and we're hopeful in doing everything we can to bring that as soon as possible. And making some other plans like with at the Huonville pool that we'll talk to councils about whether we can offset the impact. We know how important it is to the community. We also need to get it right, and we've got a range of project constraints that mean that yes, we need to update that project timeline.
That would be good, and I think it is important to remember that people have now been without a pool for a very long time, and we are getting lobbied
Sure.
quite a lot about the fact that we have two pools and neither of them are opened. Whereas a lot of people don't have any pools, and we've got two and neither of them are open. Not because of I get that the Port Ewan pool hasn't been because of our mishandling of it. And, we either fixed it or closed it. That was what it was. And there's been issues along the way. But it would be nice if we could just push the other one open and at least give some people somewhere to swim.
Yeah, and look, we'll
have a discussion about that.
We'll look to do that, but we've also got to remember that it costs. It's around $13,000 a week to run that pool at Huonville in summer, and that is not fully cost recovered by gate fees. So it's there as a community benefit. Swimming pools are absolutely important. We know how special they are. We're very lucky to have two, but we also need to be fiscally responsible. And the earlier we open that in the season, the reason it's not open all year round is because there would not be many people swimming there. I know there would be some.
There's no heating in Huonville, is it?
It is heated, but to then run that over winter, and then it would be very, very expensive. And we just know that whilst there would be some people that would be tough enough to go and swim there over winter, it would be an exorbitant cost for those few people using it. So we just need to we know it's a loved asset. We just need to manage it and manage the cost.
I did tell a lady today when she bailed me up in the street, that she will be very, very pleased when it does open.
I have been
The
saying that to
facility,
people too, but
yeah.
I think we don't appreciate how many people use a pool until none of them are opened.
Well, I think that a lot of people probably didn't realise they should have used it. Yes.
And I do also understand it's extenuating circumstances, isn't it? Like, it's not likely that this would happen again.
Our commitment to, like, the discussion that we had with councillors when the decision was made to invest further in that pool was to invest in it, but do it right.
Yeah.
And make sure that what we did was therefore enduring, would actually attract people. So it is going to be a very different facility when it reopens. We hope it will be more attractive, and that will drive people to actually utilise it, and that will make it more cost effective per visit.
And I understand that as well, but I just, perhaps if we can get the other one open a little bit earlier, that would be appreciated also, I think. But as I say, you said that's a discussion we can have at a different time.
Yeah. Thank you. All right. Well, if I have no more, I'll put that motion. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That's all councillors, and the motion is carried. There was some reports, wasn't there? Okay. And then councillor workshops. Would you like to talk about the workshops, please?
Sure. On the 17th of July, we ran a stormwater modelling workshop. So we invited infrastructure, invited our external engineers, FluSig, to present their hydraulic analysis to councillors that related to Port Huon and Scenic Hill. This looked at the inadequacies in the current system and opportunities to improve that. It also looked at, so it's a flood and inundation study. It also looked at development scenarios and what we may need to do. So it identified, for the people of Port Huon in particular and Scenic Hill to a lesser extent, there are some pretty serious flooding events that we've seen in recent times. That could obviously get worse. So this is the kind of thing that we would consider climate change adaptation, among other things. But we've now got potential mitigating options to consider and start to budget for and undertake the works. The next one we had was cybersecurity, which was a reminder, refresher on maintaining cybersecurity. We had a presentation from a local nurse practitioner on the nurse practitioner model of care that is becoming increasingly a response across Australia to the issues we have with GP shortages. I think that was very well received, answered a lot of councillors' questions on how this nurse practitioner model can work and how it can augment regular general practitioner, doctor type care. We reviewed a number of draft policies and took councillor feedback on board. And the final one was to discuss the future of the art box and how we would manage that box moving forward in a way that continues to support creative arts without creating divisions in the community.
Thank you. And we had a meeting with the minister a couple of days after, or whenever it was, and Kerry Duggan's name, I will bring it up, from the Signet Family Practice, was very highly regarded in around all medical areas and the government. So well done to Kerry for the work that she's done and is continuing to do. Councillor questions. There was one councillor question taken on notice, and that's been answered in the minutes. There was no councillor questions given on notice, but is there any councillor questions tonight without notice? Yes. Well, Councillor Jessup and then Councillor.
Thanks, Mayor. Just following on from that DA that we looked at, so maybe the question is something like in regard to motion 10.003, I know I emailed this Matt to you, 00324, clause 5 of the amended motion. Can the director provide councillors with a simple understanding of why planners felt the landslip risk was sufficient to require a landslip risk assessment over the cleared area? And please don't tell them they have to give us a lecture in planning, it's just a simple understanding of that. I don't want to overwork them for nothing.
You got that? Yep, take that on notice. Thank you. And Councillor Gibson?
Yes, I had a question relating to the general information section in the agenda, where it says, in the period of this report, no employee is elected to provide an exit interview. I attended a lecture at the ALCA conference, which was fascinating and very amusing, by a demographer who emphasised that local government is going to face a massive cliff in terms of being able to find staff, and that we, with an ageing population, and emphasise how important it was for council to use other methods to attract staff, such as, being a superior, flexible place to work, offering better living conditions, providing houses, all these sorts of things, which was really interesting. And they emphasised that local government can't compete on salary. So I guess my question was, how can we actively encourage feedback from people leaving and really dig into what it is that's in our culture or the way we do things that causes people to leave, because we really want to retain people as much as possible.
Okay, I'll go through to, yeah.
Would you like to answer that one? Yep.
I might have had an inkling of this question, so gave me a bit of time to prepare, but you will have seen in those papers, obviously, that we do provide quarterly information. So our exit interviews are actively encouraged and offered to most exiting employees to obtain feedback for continuous organisational improvement. However, some staff like exiting their fixed term casuals and things like that are very short term, not always offered an exit interview, as I said, because of the nature of the roles. Flexible feedback options are available, either formal or informal, so they get to be able to choose how they provide that. They can be face-to-face discussions or paper-based, if that's what they prefer. Discussions may be held with the applicable manager, director, CEO or manager of people and safety. So again, if they've got issues with the person that they're working with, they can always feel comfortable enough to sort of give that information to somebody else here. Interviews are also available subsequent to the employee leaving the organisation, if that is preferred as well. So again, to protect them, so that we do try and get that information, because it is very rich. I totally agree with you. We also provide an avenue for our staff to provide comments and ask questions anonymously, and the executive team provide responses, and they're provided on our internal intranet for our staff to access. And these comments are considered by us as well, and actions implemented where appropriate. We've had a few issues where we've moved some items of furniture and things like that from tea rooms to thinking that we were doing the right thing. We received anonymous feedback that it wasn't the right thing. So then we changed it back. So, we do listen and believe that it's a good way of making things better for all of us. To monitor and improve workplace culture, we have instigated monthly pulse check surveys that we're obtaining and we're tracking to see where we can also improve where we can. Regular team meetings and commence the development and implementation of a council-wide learning and development calendar, so that we can try and get us all up to that base standard that we need. We've also developed a people strategy, and that has an annual action plan. So we'll be able to develop policies, procedures and frameworks to be able to support our people, because we do understand that people are our most valuable resource here. We also provide, as you saw, the quarterly report to councillors, and for the 23-24 year we've had 46 staff leave the organisation, with 29 choosing not to complete an exit survey and 8 not being provided the opportunity because of the short-term, quick nature of the employment with us. The remaining 9 had various reasons for leaving, and we can provide more detailed report of those 9 in close notes.
Could we have, could councillors be given a monthly sort of closed council assessment of 5 people living? Do you think, or other trends, or
Well,
any trends, or
we've only had 9
yeah,
in the past year.
Yeah.
So that's why we've chosen to report quarterly
yes, okay,
on those, and more than happy to share that.
yeah, great. Okay, thank you.
Do I have any other questions? Yes, councillor Robertson?
Maybe more a request than a question. Last weekend I became aware of an abundance of rats in the town hall, which were being dealt with very proactively by the mayor that was present. And I believe this spectacular theatrical event will repeat this Friday at 7 p.m. and Saturday at 2 p.m. and 7 p.m. In the form of Huon Valley Theatre Company's performance of The Amazing Morris and His Educated Rodents. So if you feel like getting ratty and entertained on one of these cold winter evenings, come down to the town hall and as a request, please join in what your community does.
Thank you.
The audio cut out at any time during that. There are no rats in town hall.
I've caught them all.
They're very cute. They're very cute rats. And the mayor was brilliant. But I do have a serious question.
Yes.
Chief Rat Catcher.
Yeah, that's me.
She didn't catch them. She channeled them.
So what's your next question?
Next question. We mentioned, or we heard mention of settlement plans and Signet at the front end of that. I'm interested in what's in the strategy of that, and maybe what comes next and timing. So maybe what are the first 3, recognising there's plenty of work to do, but maybe what are the first 3, the front end of that program, and what's the timing on that?
Do you think we can take that one?
Yeah, I'll take that on notice so I can give a fulsome answer and some detail in this space. Yeah. But thank you for the question.
Okay. Do we have, yes, councillor Armstrong?
So it's you, Mayor. I just went to press my thing that's not there.
Yeah.
I don't have a question, but I forgot to actually just mention something. Could I do that now?
You can.
Okay.
Ollie?
So I just wanted to mention that Chester and Biddy, who have been organising the bookings for the Belverada Hall, have been doing so since 1967. That's a stellar performance, isn't it? That is a stellar performance. So the hall has decided to give them a little farewell, date to be advised, but hopefully within the next month or so. And I just thought if people are watching or if they're going to read the minutes, they might like to pop along for an afternoon tea if they know them. I mean, that would be the most outstanding service ever to the community, I think, to be managing a hall for that long is highly commendable.
I think that once you have a date or whatever's happening, I'm pretty sure if we speak to Kelly, we can.
Well, that's what I'm sort of thinking. Could we just perhaps put it out there? Because we're thinking perhaps maybe around the first weekend in September.
We'll have a look at what else is happening around the area as well, because that always helps.
That would be good.
Yeah.
But I thought if people could just remember that maybe for later on.
1967. That's pretty.
I learnt last night, we were talking about it. The original hall burnt down and they were instrumental in founding the new hall.
There you go.
That's a long haul.
It's a long haul.
That's amazing.
That's a pretty good effort. So
That's a very good
I'm pretty
effort.
sure we can do something about that. So
Absolutely.
thank you for bringing that up. Thank you.
That's how it just entered my mind now.
Was there any other? No. Okay. Is there any? There's no motions. Notice the motion for tonight's meeting. There was no reports. No. Okay. We're on to report number 16.015/24 Port Huon Sports and Aquatic Centre membership fees. Do I have a councillor to move the motion? Yes, councillor Thorpe, and a seconder, councillor Robinson. Do you wish to speak to that?
Not really. I think it's self-explanatory, and I think it's a good introduction for a gym-only fee.
Thank you. Do I have any other comments or questions, statements? No? Wish to close? No? I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That's all, councillors. Motion is carried. Report number 16.016/24, status report on the quarterly outstanding rate status. Do I have a councillor to move the motion? Yes, councillor Armstrong, and a seconder, councillor O'Neill. Do you wish to speak to this? No? Do I have any other?
I have a question.
Yes, you may.
Point 20 of the report states Tennessee has been deemed irrecoverable.
Yep.
I just am interested to know how do you deem that irrecoverable?
Okay,
What is the situation?
thank you for that. Can I pass that one through?
They're ones where we can either not contact the owner in particular, or we haven't been able to organise a payment plan. There's been no payments on the account. We are actually analysing those at the moment to then provide council with what our next steps should be in relation to those.
Okay, but they can still be collected at the sale of the property.
Yes.
Okay, so it's not entirely not recoverable
No.
completely, it's just
Through TCS,
Through this
it's not recoverable.
Okay. Do I have any other? Just make the comment that 21 where the equates to about an 80% recovery is not a bad. Yeah, that's good. So thanks for all the effort there. Okay, councillor Armstrong, do you wish to close? Okay, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That's all, councillors. The motion is carried. Report number 17.005/24, internal cleaning services, extension of contract TN 159. Do I have a councillor to move the motion? Councillor Gibson and a seconder. Councillor Armstrong, do you wish to speak to this, Councillor Gibson?
No, as long as they're doing a good cleaning job, I'm happy to go on for another 6 months.
Any other?
I just have a general question as well.
Yeah.
Have we ever done I'm not saying they've done a bad job or whatsoever, I think the staff are lovely, but have we ever done a comparison to whether it's more cost effective for us to be employing our own cleaning staff as Kingborough Council?
I'm not aware if we've done that in the past.
I mean,
It has occurred in the past, but I don't recall.
We've done an assessment though, subsequent to that. Yeah, I don't know.
I'm happy to appoint them for 6 months, but maybe during that tender process, a short consideration might potentially.
Thank you. Any other? No? Okay. Remember who that was? Was that you, Councillor Gibson? That's right. Would you like to close, Councillor Gibson?
That's fine.
All right. I'll put that motion. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That's all, councillors. The motion is carried. There's no community in place reports tonight. No. So 19.034/.
Maybe announcement of a director position being appointed for that, maybe, or something? Is that worth announcing?
Sorry, I didn't hear your mum.
Worth announcing the appointment of a new director in that
It
area?
was probably remiss of me to not do that but he's been sitting here as an acting for so long that he's sort of part of the furniture.
It's
But
about
yes.
time he performs. About time he performs.
Yeah, time to step up, Lyle. Yes, I was pleased to announce earlier this month that Lyle Ground was appointed as the Director for Community in Place, a newly formed department, bringing together our community wellbeing, livability arms of the council alongside strategic planning, and environment, all those services. So, look, yeah, Lyle's been with council for 6 years, and worn several hats, so he's well rounded, and excited to have him moving out of acting and a full deck of directors. No more acting, and we're diligently pushing that down through the rest of the council as well, so that we're getting a stable operating environment.
Fantastic.
Well done. Thank you for bringing that to the light, Councillor Jessup. All right. 19.034/24, we're about to move into closed council. So I'd like to thank those in the gallery tonight for attending and those watching at home. The next ordinary meeting of council is on Wednesday, the 28th of August at 6 p.m.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
The recommendation is that the meeting now be closed to the public at
7:40.
pursuant to Regulation 15 of the Meeting Procedures Regulations to discuss the following matters. Do I have a councillor to move a motion to go into closed? Councillor Burgess and Councillor Thorpe. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That's all councillors. I advise that in accordance with Huon Valley Council's audio recording of council meeting policy, recording of the open session of the meeting ceased at